The Detroit Lions have the best offensive line in football, and it is a pretty widely regarded fact that that is the case, right? With Taylor Decker and Penei Sewell and Frank Ragnow and Kevin Zeitler joining the mix, it is pretty evident that the Detroit Lions are the most talented offensive line unit across the NFL, and they receive a lot of praise for it. Penei Sewell gets talked about in the media a lot. Even Frank Ragnow and Taylor Decker get quite a bit of media hype and acceptance. But a group that very rarely gets talked about by the media, by the fans, and really by anybody of their own teams is the backup offensive lineman. The group that rarely sees the field, the group that is never ever talked about as a starter, never is talked about as a star player. But in the case of the Detroit Lions, it's a group that was very impactful in 2023, and a group that without the depth and the talent that they have likely would not have won their first NFC North crown for the 30 years and likely would not have gone to the NFC Championship game a season ago. So today, we're going to take a look at the Detroit Lions offensive line depth, take a look at how strong they actually are and how deep they actually are on the offensive line, and talk about some of the players that, if they weren't on the Detroit Lions, could potentially be starting across the NFL because they are that talented and that productive. Now, of course, the Lions starting offensive line is Taylor Decker, Graham Glasgow, Frank Ragnow, Kevin Zeitler, and Penei Sewell. An offensive line that consists of two players at the top of their positions. I would say that Penei Sewell and Frank Ragnow are easily top two players at their positions, and the rest of the offensive line is well above average. Taylor Decker was great to end the season last year and has been a staple of the Detroit Lions since 2016. Kevin Zeitler is one of the league's best offensive guards over the last decade, and Graham Glasgow is well above average at the guard position with versatility to play every interior position along the line. However, a group, again, that doesn't get talked about very much is the depth of this offensive line. It's the Kayode Awosika. It's the Colby Sorsdales. It's the Dan Skippers and the Connor Galvins. And even going through the NFL draft, the Detroit Lions added a lot of depth. Of course, drafting Giovani Manu in the fourth round, Duke Clemens and Kingsley Eguakun being undrafted rookie free agents, and Christian Mahogany being a sixth round steal by the Detroit Lions. They have put a lot of draft stock and a lot of capital into their offensive line. And I think that last year was a prime example of exactly why that pays off and exactly why it was worth the compensation. Now, starting off with the backup offensive lineman, we'll take a look at Kayode Awosika, a 6'5", 315-pound player that a few years ago was drafted by the Philadelphia Eagles out of the University of Buffalo, and last year played 252 snaps for the Detroit Lions, including starting the NFC Championship game in relief of left guard Jonah Jackson. Now, in his 252 snaps, Kayode Awosika allowed just 2 penalties and a singular sack on Jared Goff. And while Kayode has been a pretty solid addition to the Detroit Lions offensive line, he's never really had the opportunity to start and be a full-time starter in the NFL. Of course, being drafted by the Philadelphia Eagles, another team that has one of the best offensive lines in football, Awosika never really had the opportunity to play and never really had the opportunity to make an impact. So when he signed with the Detroit Lions, he kind of was put right back in that same situation, but due to injury concerns with Jonah Jackson, Kayode Awosika made 3 starts a season ago, played over 250 snaps, and played really, really well. Starting in the NFC Championship game, he was a great offensive lineman, went toe-to-toe with that super talented defensive line of San Francisco, and I thought not only held his own, but played really, really well for the snaps in the time that he was asked to. And while you probably don't want Kayode Awosika being the full-time starter for 17 games in a season, if you were to tell me that Kayode Awosika played 250 snaps, I'd feel pretty comfortable. If you were to tell me that Kayode Awosika played even upwards of 500 offensive snaps for your football team as a starting left guard, I would still feel pretty confident that Kayode Awosika is a player that you can rely on and a player that can do really good things for your offense. Now, another player that I think is in a very similar boat is Colby Sorsdal, a 6'6", 315-pound offensive lineman, the former 5th-round selection from William and Mary in 2023. Colby Sorsdal played 253 snaps a season ago, where he allowed 2 penalties and 1 sack all the same. while playing the right tackle and right guard positions. Now, one of those penalties and one of those sacks came in the 10 snaps that Colby Sorsdal played at right tackle against the Seattle Seahawks when the Detroit Lions were down to their fourth string right tackle. Colby Sorsdal was not meant to play right tackle for the Detroit Lions in the NFL and was really all of camp and all of the preseason was put at the right guard spot. But due to injury concerns and due to injuries arising, Colby Sorsdal was thrown in at right tackle after a full offseason of playing right guard, and he got beat pretty bad. Right? He gave up a sack, gave up a penalty, but that means in nearly 250 snaps of right guard, Colby Sorsdal had just one penalty and 0 sacks. He's a player that is super good in the run game, a very solid pass protector, was massive in his first start versus the Las Vegas Raiders, and really good in the other snaps that he played. And I do think that Colby Sorsdal could be a long-term solution at the right guard position. He has the size, he has the tools, he has the polish, and with another year to sit behind a guy like Kevin Zeitler, has a lot of time to learn and develop. Then when Kevin Zeitler retires, I wouldn't be surprised if Colby Sorsdal or one of the other guards on this roster were being groomed to take up the mantle and start in 2025. Now, taking a look at another player, of course, Dan Skipper, the longtime veteran of this NFL team, 6'9", 317 pounds, a really good sixth man swing tackle type of player. Last year played 101 snaps, 1 penalty, and 0 sacks. And while he was never thrown primarily at the left or right tackle, again, always being kind of that sixth offensive line or that swing tackle, I do think he's a pretty good depth player. I think he's a really good, as I said, just sixth man on the offensive line, and a player that you probably don't love if he was to start, but a player that is going to play his role really well and be impactful as that swing tackle. And then you have Connor Galvin from a season ago, a good player in the preseason, 6'7", 300 pounds, probably more of a practice squad player, but I think he's being groomed to take up the mantle of Dan Skipper when Dan Skipper eventually leaves the Detroit Lions, right? 6'7", really big, really tall, good movement skills, probably a guy that will never be a full-time starter on your offensive line, but a player that could be that swing tackle, that could be the sixth man, that could be just the extra offensive line and the extra weight you need to get across the goal line, to get it that first down, right? I think that's the role that Connor Galvin will eventually develop into, and I think he will take up the mantle of Dan Skipper when Dan Skipper eventually leaves. So that's the one-to-one comparison there. But then the Detroit Lions drafted a couple of players this year, starting off with Giovani Manu in the 4th round, a 6'8", 354-pound offensive lineman from the Canadian Football League. Great movement skills, an 8.84 RAS score, have every single athletic tool in the book. And from what I've been hearing, has been having a really good camp with the Detroit Lions. Now, Giovani Manu is a developmental prospect. He is a player that likely won't play very much in his rookie season and ideally will not play at all in his rookie season. Ideally will not play at all in his rookie season outside of being a swing tackle or potentially that 6th offensive lineman, just to add some more girth and some more power to the running game. But ideally, Giovani Manu does not take a snap at left or right tackle this year because that is the job of Sewell and Decker. But a couple of years down the road, I do think that Giovani Manu could be the starting tackle. He has the size, he has the tools, he has every single skill that you would want to see out of an offensive lineman, and his tape with British Columbia was really good a season ago. He is a team that was one of the best rushing offenses in the CFL, was one of the best passing offenses in the CFL, and it was anchored on the offensive line primarily by Giovani Manu, a player that, again, just a huge player with great movement skills, and with Hank Fairley coaching him every single day and going against Aiden Hutchinson at every single practice, I think there's a good chance that Giovani Manu could develop into a really strong offensive lineman and potentially be the player that 2 or 3 years down the line is going to replace Taylor Decker as the Lions' starting offensive tackles. Now, Christian Mahogany last year was really good at Boston College. 422 pass blocking snaps, 0 sacks, 0 hits, and just 7 quarterback pressures. Projected to go somewhere in the late 3rd to early 4th, Christian Mahogany actually fell all the way to the 6th round of the NFL draft, where he was snatched up by the Detroit Lions pretty quickly. Now, Christian Mahogany is pretty solely a right tackle. He is a player, or a right guard, excuse me. He is a player that for one reason or another, never really had that versatility at Boston College. I think a large part of it had to do with his left leg actually being significantly longer than his right leg, which obviously leads to different variety of play, and meaning that he probably can't play one side of the offensive line nearly as well, can't anchor on one side of the offensive line nearly as well as the other. So Christian Mahogany is pretty stuck at the right guard position or the left guard position. He is a player that probably isn't going to move around very much, but a player that was projected to be a starter by me, at least in 2024 for a lot of teams, is now going to be at best the backup right guard for the Detroit Lions. And I think come year two, when Kevin Zeitler and when Graham Glasgow are no longer with the team, I think a Christian Mahogany will slide in pretty easily and be a really good Jonah Jackson replacement and be the long-term option for the Detroit Lions at their guard positions. And then you have the undrafted rookie centers, right? Duke Clemens from UCLA had a 79.4 pass blocking grade by PFF, a 78.7 run blocking grade, which ranked third among centers in college football, and only allowed a single sack in 347 pass blocking snaps. Kingsley Egukan from Florida was injured in 2023, but in 145 pass blocking snaps allowed just one sack. In 2022, in 400 pass blocking snaps, allowed 0 sacks, 1 hit, and 15 quarterback hurries. I think both of them could compete for playing time in year two, and I think if the future of Frank Ragnow is still uncertain, if Frank Ragnow does only play one more year of football, I think the Lions have a couple really good young depth pieces to kind of develop this year and see who can win that battle next year going into 2025. So with all of that being said, I think that there are a lot of talent on the Detroit Lions offensive line in their depth. I truly believe that if you were to throw Kayode Awosika, Colby Sorsdal, and Christian Mahogany on another football team right now, they could probably start for 5 to 10 football teams right now on the offensive line. And even though they have some other developmental guys like Manu and Clemens and Egukan, I do think that eventually those guys could develop into really good players as well. So while the offensive line of the Detroit Lions, the Penei Sewells, and the Frank Ragnows get all of this praise and all of this hype, I think the Detroit Lions are set up for a lot of long-term success on the offensive line. I think Giovani Manu is the long-term answer at left tackle. I think that Christian Mahogany is the long-term answer at left guard. And I think that potentially Kayode Awosika or Colby Sorsdal are going to be the long-term option at right guard as well. So you have your right tackle locked up for the next couple of years. You have your potential left tackle of the future, your guards of the future who are both really young and really talented, and potentially with Duke Clemens and Kingsley Egukan, your starting center of the future. So with that being said, I just wanted to bring some light to the Detroit Lions offensive line depth, to some of the players that were instrumental in the Detroit Lions run to the NFC Championship game a season ago, and players that will likely have a large impact on the 2024 campaign as well. With that being said, that is all I have for you guys today, just kind of going over the Lions offensive line depth and talking about how good they actually are and how good they will be in the future. But with all of that being said, that is all I have for you guys right now. Please, if you have not done so already, please go down to the subscribe button below, hit that subscribe bell, hit the bell notification so you never miss a Detroit Lions upload. You are 13 minutes into a video about the Detroit Lions backup offensive line. So clearly you like the Detroit Lions content. Clearly you like the video. So do me a favor, subscribe to the channel. We're trying to hit 4,000 by the start of training camp, and we are just 15 away. So 15 of you can hit that subscribe button. I'd be very appreciative. But with all of that being said, that is all I have for you guys right now. Thank you all so very much for watching. And until next time, and as always, go Lions.